It's Delia. That's me.
Hey Daily Boppers, what's up? June is Pride, which means it's a super awesome and important time to talk about all of the reasons that there are to take pride in being queer, but this week is also a super especially important time to talk about taking pride in being Latina, because it was this week, 75 years ago, that the infamous Zoot riots took place in Los Angeles, California. And no, I'm not talking about the 1997 hit song by the Cherry Poppin' Daddies. The actual Zoot riots were far more chilling and sobering. It was 1943, and anti-Mexican American sentiments were high. This was literally the era of signs that said no Mexicans or dogs allowed on public establishments being considered socially acceptable. The zoot suit itself was a style of suit favored by the jazz-influenced Pachuco subculture, which was popular with minorities, especially Mexican Americans, for whom both the subculture and the style that came with it represented a spirit of defiance against white racism and segregation. Unfortunately, the anti-Mexican American sentiments in LA came to a head and a mob was formed. Literally thousands of United States military members, off-duty cops, and racist white civilians spent the week roaming the streets of Los Angeles, viciously attacking any Mexican-American youth and other minorities they encountered with pipes, bottles, and clubs, and publicly stripping anyone they found wearing a zoot suit. The LA police didn't sit idly by, but they also definitely were not there to protect and serve. They joined in on the attacks, arresting only the victims, and at least 500 already abused and assaulted Mexican Americans were additionally arrested on false charges ranging from rioting to vagrancy. The presses praised the attacks, claiming they'd rid the area of hoodlums and miscreants, stereotyping Mexican Americans and other minorities in a way which still ends in violence today, and shortly after the riots, the distinctive zoot suits themselves were even banned from the LA area. Looking back at events like these, when people say that we must learn from our history lest we be doomed to repeat it in America, I feel like this is the shit that we're talking about. Additionally, when you have a man who literally ran for the US presidency under the slogan "Let's Make America Great Again," who also heavily campaigned on similarly anti-Mexican American ideas, it's hard for me not to wonder if the America of the Zoot Suit riots was the same America that that man thinks was great, and like, if that's not a major what the fuck moment for you, then I don't know what's wrong with you, but I seriously feel like something is. It's only even more sobering when you stop and think about the Mexican American children who even right now are just being lost and no one cares about it, or separated from their families and put into ICE detention centers that literally look like something out of a World War II documentary. To me, it's when I look back at times like these in our history and even things that are happening to minorities in America right now, when I feel like it's time to acknowledge that unless you're white, maybe America was never necessarily even all that great to begin with. I mean, this was the 1940s that we are talking about. This was supposed to be that super Captain America time in the nation's history when we're supposed to be able to look back and be proud for going overseas and punching Nazis, but at the same time, back home, we're busy beating and stripping and falsely arresting Mexican Americans, putting Japanese Americans in internment camps, and let's not pretend that racism and discrimination and violence against Black Americans and Native Americans has like ever not been a thing. For me, as a Latina woman thinking about the Zoot Suit riots, I'm forced to remember not only that my grandfather literally owned a Zoot Suit, but also all of the racism and discrimination that I faced and that my father faced for that same heritage. It reminds me of how I grew up in Florida being bullied for my Mexican American heritage, and even as an adult faced employment and housing discrimination for the same reason. It reminds me of how anti-Latinx racism has still shaped my life even without an event as severe as the Zoot Suit riots in my own life. Looking at today's climate, even as a fourth generation Mexican American, it's still just so sobering and really puts to mind how important it is to remember that Nazi Germany is not the only place where white supremacy gone out of hand has led to events of mass racist violence against people. So it's definitely something from our history which I feel is very important for Americans today to remember, and remember that like we are not immune to this shit, and that we all owe it to one another no matter what individual minority struggles we face, to remember events like these for one another together and stand together against horrible things like racist and white supremacist violence, in affirming that we as a singular human race will never go back to these places of violence again. We have to remember events like these and stand against them ever happening again. We owe it to ourselves as a singular human race for every act of violence that we have ever stupidly and shallowly committed against one another for whatever dumb reasons to always look back at every event like this and remember it and always say, no more, never again. I feel like the fact that the week the Zoot riots took place overlaps with Pride also makes it a really important time for us to like look at our LGBT spaces and make sure that we're not allowing racism into them, because like that happens sometimes and there's no excuse for it. Activists of color also need to be making sure that our activist spaces are safe spaces for LGBT people, because people are LGBT and of color, and for those of us who are, we don't get to separate those two things. It's seriously not that far of a shot glasses throw from the importance of the Stonewall riots to the importance of the Zoot Suit riots, or the other way around. And just basically, if you're not Latinx, be aware of this part of our history and how important it is that we don't forget it, and that we don't let people who want to try to be racist towards Latinx people today forget it. And if you are Latinx, then be aware of your history and take pride in your heritage. And until next time, as always, be your most beautiful you.